Okay, so I think we are just about on time to start today's session. Welcome to those of you who are just joining in for this morning's Reactor London session. So as you can see on the screen, today's session is Microsoft Teams developer platform. So this will be delivered by Tom Morgan, who is a Microsoft Teams platform developer and Microsoft MVP. So we're delighted to have Tom back again delivering another session with us. It will be 1 hour long. You have the opportunity to ask as many questions as you like throughout. So there is a Q&A window that you can post any questions or even any comments and feedback through. So please feel free to do that throughout the hour. And this session will be recorded too. So what will happen is I will get that link onto YouTube, which usually takes about 48 hours. And I will post it up on the Reactor London meetup group where you likely signed up for this session. So the link will be posted in there once it's live. And just to give those of you a bit of background into Reactors, in case you're not too familiar. So Reactors are local community spaces where developers and startups meet, learn and connect. So Reactors build this community by providing training, hands-on workshops, industry speakers, plus meetups and other community events which are all related to emerging technology trends. And Reactors are physical event spaces where we usually hold these types of sessions, but due to obviously current circumstances, we're now hosting all of these sessions on our online platforms instead. So I'll get back to today's session and hand over to Tom to kick us off.
Great, thanks very much, Emma. Hello everyone, hope you're doing really well today. Let's talk about Teams, let's talk about the developer platform. Let's talk about why you're here. Why are you here? Not as in you're not welcome, of course you're welcome. We're going to talk about building apps. Maybe you are not a developer, like an out and out core developer. Maybe you are a developer, but you haven't really kind of got into the Microsoft Teams development platform. You've done some other stuff. Maybe you don't think you're a developer, but really you are. By the way, if you do anything with PowerShell, anything scripting, you are a developer, you just don't realize you are. So what brings you here? Maybe you picked up on some of the buzz around Teams apps and the Teams app experience, and you want some of that. That's a smart move, I think. We're going to be talking about kind of really the whole future of communication today, which sounds kind of broad and audacious, but I think it's fair. So we'll see by the end of the hour if you agree with that, but let's buckle up, because I think it's really important. We need to be talking about where things are going. We need to be talking about the future. That's always really important. You have to keep thinking and talking about the future, or just risk being consigned to the past. And everything around us is evolving, and that has never been so true today, like this year. The pace of change right now and the last 6 months has really intensified. The technology behind that is constantly changing. It's what makes it exciting. You know, like sharks, we kind of need to keep evolving and keep moving. To keep on the leading edge of stuff, and that keeps things interesting. That's why we're all in tech, because it keeps it interesting. Have you noticed, and this is interesting, so I wrote most of these kind of slide notes and things kind of not, a few months ago, before lots of the world just started working from home, but it was true then, it's really true now, how central Microsoft Teams has become to everyone's life right now. And not just, that isn't just COVID, that just made it happen faster. Teams has become the operating system for the workplace. Bringing everything together for users and kind of letting them communicate with their content has really worked out really well. Users really like it, they love that experience. It means they're not context switching all the time. They're more productive. If you're building apps today for the enterprise, you need to be building them inside Microsoft Teams. Otherwise, you're really not meeting users where they are. So let's shoot down some assumptions first. It's not hard to build apps in Microsoft Teams. It really is not hard. There's so much support available today. The entry point is quite low. There are some cliffs along the way, but you just need to know where they are. There's a lot of stuff you can do. We're going to be talking about building bots in this session, but actually we're going to cover way more than that, because building bots in Teams is easy now. and it's just one part of the whole experience. Do you want an example of how easy it is to build bots in Teams today? Do you? Good, because that's what you're going to get. So last year we had a work experience student join us for 3 days. Her name was Holly. She's 15 or 16 years old now. In 2.5 days, this is what she built for us in the office. This is a Spotify bot. It connects to the Spotify API. Holly built it in a few days. It connects to this kind of Spotify account that we run, well, when we're all in the development office. That's the one we've had. And you can issue it commands. You can see what's playing. You can kind of search for, play new tracks. 2.5 days old. So 2.5 days of development, 15 years old. That's the future right now. Like, that's where we're at. This is why this stuff's so important. You kind of need to keep moving and understand this stuff. Like, you've never need to move so fast, because this stuff is happening right now. And you don't just have to believe me. This is Mary Jo Foley. I was talking to her, this is in July this year, right before Inspire. And I asked her where she would focus her efforts if she was a partner today. So like a Microsoft partner, like an ISV or whatever, where would she focus her efforts? And she said, if you look at where Microsoft is really beating the drum right now, Teams is the obvious place. And if you can find any kind of value, any kind of way to add value around Teams, that's what she would be focusing heavy on. So you don't have to take it from me. Like, go and listen to her, go and see what she's saying. She knows her stuff. She's been covering Microsoft for a long time. Okay, so that's the why. That's why we're all here. So I've said it's easy. Let's break it down a little bit into kind of 3 big areas. We're going to talk through each of these areas in turn. I'm going to give you some kind of examples and places you can go, and ways in which you can kind of take it further. So we're going to talk about the Teams user interface and that experience. We're going to talk about bots, and we're going to talk about Microsoft Graph. Let's start with the Teams UI and the Teams experience. What do we mean when we say the Teams UI? Well, this is really, how can you change how Teams looks to users, how the client looks? How can you sprinkle your own bits of whatever it is, business logic, legacy system integration, parts of your organization or your application? How can you sprinkle that through Teams? And there's some ways that you probably have seen, and there might be some ways that you haven't seen. So let's go through these. Tabs, I think you'll probably be familiar with how tabs look. It's, you see them on channels and on one-to-one conversations. They're the things that kind of pop out. It's a big web page. It's a big canvas for you to put in what you like. Messaging extensions, less common, I think. I'm going to show you one as a quick show you what they look like, just in case you haven't seen any. I think these are really powerful. I don't think they're used enough, actually. I think they're really, really important. They kind of break into a couple of different things: search commands, link unfurling. So if you haven't seen this, you see this now in like Twitter and LinkedIn and native Teams as well. If you paste in a URL, it will kind of digest the title and the metadata and stuff and break it out and give you like a nice card that that helps you see what's going on before you click the link. You're actually in control of that. You can change some of that yourself. So you can actually make your own version of that, unfurl it. And so if you've got a legacy CRM system, let's say, and you might want to use that, you can actually have your users paste in their link. You can unfurl it and just give all the information, like a nice concise card that isn't just the title and the metadata. You can do whatever you want there. So that's really cool. Action commands are the other thing as well. They sort of go alongside with task modules, really. It's a really kind of versatile way for you to kind of control that experience inside the Teams client. And all of this is in service of you not creating your own application, your own kind of thing on the side that makes users go and switch and kind of switch away and see what's going. It kind of helps you bring it all into the Teams client. And you don't have to do something that is just one of these things. You can combine all these things together and include bots in all of this as well, which I haven't mentioned because I'm going to talk about them in a minute. But the best applications actually you build on Teams today combine these things into multiple different, with multiple different interfaces to create one great experience. One really nice thing about the Teams UI kind of development platform is that when you build stuff here on the Teams UI, it will work just as well on desktop as it will for mobile. It will work on any OS where the Teams client is. As a developer, you don't have to do anything special. You build it once against the Teams UI, and then it will render itself nicely in all these different places. And that's really nice as a developer, not to have to worry about, okay, fine, I've built this thing, but now it only works on the Windows desktop. It doesn't work on Mac, it doesn't work on mobile. Actually, you get loads and loads of kind of choice there about doing this kind of stuff. So one thing I do want to tell you about is the Teams Toolkit. So this was announced at Ignite, and it's kind of scaffolding ready for your common UI extensions. All the things I've just talked about makes it really easy to get started. I'm going to show you what it looks like in a minute. It is everything you need to get started and nothing that you don't. So it's slightly different from sample code. Sample code tends to be a what's a good way of it's like an exercise, or it's a common scenario, and it gives you all the code to kind of complete that scenario. Sometimes that's what you want, but actually if you're creating a new thing from scratch, what you kind of want is the scaffolding. You want all the bits that you need, and then you can jump in and add your own stuff on top. I don't like personally starting from the sample code and then having to take everything away again to get back to, because you don't know how much to take away, right? You take away too much and then it breaks. So I like scaffolding because it gives me I can build on that. And just before I show you all of that, you should also know that for everything in the Teams UI that I've just talked about, there are Microsoft Learn modules that are really good jumping off points for getting some more information about all of this stuff and diving a little bit deeper into everything that's going on. So for each of these, I'm going to show you one of these real quick, actually. Let's choose the tabs one at the top. If I just flip over here. So this is that tabs one. It takes you to a nice Learn page. This is really nice, actually. So this whole kind of set of exercises it will walk you through just creating your first tab. So I can click start here. There's a bunch of stuff to read. I'm just going to kind of flip through quite a lot of it. You can see there's loads of stuff to kind of give you the backstory, give you the why, understand the context in which you're building. And then you get into, if I can get all the way down to the bottom, the actual exercises of creating a personal tab, what that looks like. This is using the Yeoman generator. If you know what Yeoman generators are, that's great. This is using one of those. If you don't worry about it. This takes you through everything. I'm going to show you a slightly different way that you can do it as well, using the Microsoft Teams Toolkit. But this is really nice set of exercises to go through to kind of, if you've never done it before and you want to build your first, whatever it is, tab, extension, module, whatever, great way to do it. So that's all of that. The next thing I want to show you is, so we've talked through those and that's great. Yes, let's show you two things. So I'm going to show you messaging extensions just to make sure we're on the same page, because I know everyone's probably seen tabs and I want to make sure everyone has definitely seen messaging extensions, and then I'm going to show you the Teams Toolkit as well to go through. So this is my Teams client. Hopefully it's not a complete surprise. So starting a new conversation, down here are messaging extensions. They live next to your emojis and your GIFs and everything else. You can put your own ones in here. So let's say you have a product catalog that is for your organization, and it contains kind of product codes, and everybody in your organization talks product codes everywhere, because that's how your organization runs. And if you're new into that company, talking product codes all the time is kind of confusing, because you don't have that knowledge in the same way that everyone else does. So you're constantly switching back to the catalog somewhere to look up all these product codes. That is a perfect thing to bring in as a messaging extension, because I can start a conversation now in Teams. Let's talk about this product, and I want to include some information about this particular product. So these are fake products, just so you know. They're actually dynamically generated, so it can take a little while the first time. But let's pretend this is linked to my product catalog, so you can see the kind of dynamically generated images. But I can start searching for a product code that I know exists. Okay, perfect. This one, I can choose it. I can see some stuff from the CMS, around stock levels and stuff. I can click that and it will make a nice card for me. I can put it into the conversation, And now everybody understands. I've got a nice link to the CMS. I don't have to go doing that each time. This is a much nicer way to talk about things. So that is a example of a messaging extension, and I think they're really, really useful for bringing in information from legacy systems and bringing them into Microsoft Teams. So I said I was going to talk about messaging extensions and also the Teams toolkit. So let's also cover the Teams toolkit. So the Teams toolkit is available for Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. I'm showing it to you in Visual Studio Code, as you can see. And it allows you to create this kind of scaffolding for your first application. When you install it into Visual Studio Code, you'll see a Teams button down the side here. And there's a few things in here. So if you click on Open the Toolkit, this is a great jumping off point for making sure you've got everything set up in your environment and all the things that you need to go here. When you're ready, you can say create a new Teams app. Let's give it a name. Call mine Random Reactor. Yeah, why not? And now I just kind of choose what it is I want to make. Do I want to make an application that is just a tab or a tab and a bot? I'm just going to choose just a tab for now to keep it simple. Then choose some kind of criteria for the particular thing you've chosen. In my case, I'm just going to keep it as a personal tab and click finish. And what it's then going to build is all the stuff I need, and it's also going to generate a Teams manifest file so that I can drop it straight into Teams. It's given me everything I need to actually start running it locally. So previous to this, you'd need to go and read a bunch of blog posts about how to kind of do local build deploying to Teams, how you use ngrok to kind of do the HTTP tunneling, because Teams has to have a public HTTP address, and you can absolutely go and read up on all of that stuff. But if you're just trying to get started, this is a really nice way of saying, okay, just follow these instructions, everything's been set up. And if we look at the code here, all of this stuff in here is everything that you need and nothing that you don't. So this is a React app, and it's been set up with just the bare minimum. If you get down this line here, is really the only scenario specific code. So it's not like a massive great example of like something that does 3 things and makes you auth and has all these other requirements. It's not that at all. It is just the scaffolding. So I find these really, really good to get started, because behind the scenes, all the kind of literally the scaffolding has all been set up for me. So I think these are really, really good. If you use Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code, absolutely go and check them out because I think they're great. Okay. A couple of things about building stuff inside Teams. Teams is a collaboration application, and the revolution right now is around collaboration and collaborating alongside data and alongside information. So think about that when you build your app. So collab happens well in channels. Kind of don't, if you have an opportunity when you're building your application, if it makes sense to, think about making it something that everybody can use inside of a channel rather than a one-to-one experience with one user and one application, because you increase the visibility of your application, you enhance its discovery. If you do all of that, really, you make a better experience. Ideally, if you do that, the content inside your application should be actionable and not just informational stuff. So not just a way of surfacing information, but also taking action as well. That kind of increases the usefulness. Try and promote sharing wherever you can. Those things like messaging extensions and the link furling just make it easy for users to share information inside Teams. Being proactive. So what we haven't really spoken about, but is kind of covered if you step through some of those kind of learn modules, is the way you can send like actionable messages to users. You can send cards to users, you can send activity notifications, so you can be proactive and you can kind of help users, give them actionable messages, make it easy for them to take the next action, removing some of the kind of lag time, if you like, in business processes. And then when you've done all of that, actually you can make your app customizable as well. There's lots of support, especially around tabs, for having your application set up the way that makes the most sense for your users, and every user being slightly different. The big thing here really is kind of don't don't make your application a silo of information that can't be shared. So just think about that in the design. It's quite important. It's a different style of application maybe. So it's worth kind of thinking through how you design your application to kind of really enhance that sharing and enhance discoverability. And you don't have to, I know I've said a lot of things, that doesn't mean it has to be a massive, long, protracted, expensive design session. You don't have to do that stuff at all. Just talk to your users. Just go talk to them. Like you don't need to know it all. You don't think you need to know it all. And you also don't need to be a designer. Like Teams experience is kind of the way you build apps and stuff. You can grab a user and say, well, if we put that there inside your Teams conversation, would that be useful? What if it then did that? What if you had a button there, what would it do? Like users get that. You're not giving them a blank canvas, like in the same way that you might do with like a Win32 app or even a web page. You're not giving them a completely blank canvas and saying, what do you want? You're saying, like, we have Teams. Where would you want to see the best bits of information? What makes sense to go where, and what actions make sense to go where? So even just whiteboarding out with users, you can go a really, really long way in kind of understanding what's important and where you can really add value. And also, you can do it iteratively as well. You don't need to boil the ocean, right? You just do one thing well and then build on that, because the other problem, if you like, is that users have loads and loads of choice these days. Users have never had so much choice. So if they don't like your application, and this is equally true for internal apps as it is for external ones these days, they just won't use it. They'll go somewhere else. And that is always a challenge. Okay, let's shift gears. Let's talk about bots, because everybody wants to build a bot, right? So, but why bots? Why bots in Teams? Well, this is another really good way of surfacing information, because if you've got a user inside Teams via a bot experience, you can not only surface information, but also action information from a variety of different places. So, that might be legacy data stores that you've got. It might be other services. It might be external services. All of Office 365, all of Microsoft 365 is accessible to you via kind of a bot interface. Bots are really nothing more than a different user interface. It's kind of a posh command line in a way. It's you having a chat with a bot, the bot giving you information. That can be rich information, it can be cards, it can be data, it can be links, it can just be text, it can be whatever you need it to be. All of that happening inside of Teams makes a really nice end user experience. So how does it all work? Well, actually, when you're building a bot inside Teams, you're using something that's not actually Teams specific. You're using something that is called the Microsoft Bot Framework, and it's a kind of separate service, but you don't need to worry about it particularly. But it's good to have the backstory. It's a separate Microsoft service that exposes a number of different channels, of which Microsoft Teams is one of those channels. So you build against the bot framework, and you build something that works for the bot framework. Actually, what you're then doing is enabling it to work not just in Microsoft Teams, but in any other supported channel as well. So that's Slack, it's Twilio, it's SMS, and all these other kind of services. So that's kind of super useful. As a developer, you don't need to understand the intricacies of all these different channels and all these different weird ways they work and weird ways in which they collect and sample data and the messages and stuff. You just write it once against the bot framework and you're off to the races, and it works equally well on all these other channels. Announced relatively recently is support in bot framework for Amazon Alexa devices and also Google Home, which is really interesting. I actually had a bot that surfaced Teams presence information, and it was a bot I built on Bot Framework, and they announced this new support for Amazon services, and I went there and I kind of enabled the channel, clicked some buttons, didn't do any more development code, and just like that, actually, my bot that was working in Teams also now works on Alexa devices. So amazing, really. How cool that is. I didn't have to do anything. It just kind of showed up and started working as a voice skill, really. I'd written it as a text skill, now it's a voice skill. Amazing. So yeah, that's kind of really good to know. It's important because it kind of increases the usefulness of your bots as well. You're not then just writing against Microsoft Teams, you're writing something that works everywhere. And this has kind of been a really interesting evolution in how the bot framework has grown over the past few years. And it's really grown in stature, it's grown in capability, and kind of, I think, grown in importance as well. Just to give you kind of a bit of a story about that, I first started talking about bots in 2017 around the bot framework. And my kind of go-to demo for building bots is a weather bot, because everybody understands the weather. Everybody knows like what a bot might look like that does the weather. You sort of say, I want the weather for London or New York, whatever. It goes away, calls an API to go and get the weather, gives it back to you, and there you go, right? Everybody understands that, but it's really useful to do as a demo because actually you're just calling an API. So that could be anything. It doesn't have to be the weather. It could be your third-party integration system, your product database, your sales database, whatever. It could be any number of things. In 2017, building that weather bot using the bot framework was a full 60-minute session. It was me sitting in front of a laptop, giving a session for a full 60 minutes, coding it from scratch. It was terrifying to do as a session because it was all live code and there wasn't any room, like there wasn't any time margin for error. And in fact, you can see from this photo someone took at the time, I carried my own keyboard to conferences because I was typing that much code. And it was, honestly, it was probably pretty boring as well to watch. Fast forward a year from the bot framework, and that 60-minute session was then a 30-minute session. What had happened in between that same session? Well, actually, all of that stuff moved into the Azure Bot Service, which made it way easier to get started building bots. It's still a really good way to build bots today. Go to Azure, go create new resource, choose web app bot, click a sample, you're done. It creates all the bits for you in Azure. You can download them to Visual Studio if you want, or you can use the online editor, and you've got a bot that works straight away. You shortcut all of the setup. So that cut in half the time. I think this is actually me at the London Reactor, the real in-person London Reactor, I think, giving that talk in 2019, I think, building that same weather bot in 30 minutes. Still involved lots of code. And I started to get feedback from people saying, this is great, but what if I'm not a developer? You're telling me I can still build bots, but actually it turns out there's still quite a lot of code involved. Let's bring it all the way up to 2020. What's changed? Well, announced back end of last year at Ignite, Bot Framework Composer. So this is really new, like really exciting, fairly new now. It's kind of 6 months old or something, but it's really exciting. So this is a user interface for Bot Framework. So it's kind of drag and drop to build up your bot. And it's a bit more than like a nice front end because it's actually building the code behind the scenes as well. And at any point you can download the code and work with it and extend it. So it's not like a big black box. It is a really nice way of either doing quick proof of concepts or starting for a bot. And then when it gets more complicated, you can drag it out of there into real code. It's also a really good way of getting to understand how the bot framework works because you can mock up scenarios using the drag and drop editor and then go and look at the code and see how it works. So a really kind of nice addition to the bot framework. So I'm going to show you that same weather bot. I'm going to show you how it looks inside the bot framework composer as well. So you've got like a bit of a sense for how the bot framework composer looks. Talking all of these things I'm showing you are kind of like they could be an entire hour-long session in themselves. So I'm trying to give you a flavor of everything and then give you the places to kind of deep dive into that sound interesting. So this is that same weather bot, but kind of refashioned for the bot framework composer. And you can see that I've cheated really. I'm using trigger phrases rather than any kind of natural language stuff. Bot framework composer completely supports it all. I was just in a rush, but you can add these composable parts. So at any point I can click and say, send a response, ask a question, create a condition, dialogue management, external resources, send an HTTP request. That's what I do to call the weather API. So I'm just asking these questions. So say wherefore, and I'm going to put the response inside a variable called dialog.location. I'm going to use that when I send off the API call. I'm going to pass it the location. I'm going to have a look at the status code that comes back, and assuming it's a 200, then I'm just going to take the content and just kind of put it in this property, and then I'm just going to look at it like with various properties to send back a, right now it's something, whatever the temperature is, whatever the weather conditions are. That's how you can really quickly build up that same weather bot just by creating these things, dragging and dropping them together and stitching them together. At any point, I can click Test in Emulator. It's going to open the Bot Framework emulator for me, he says. It has opened it over here, so let me bring it over here for you. And so I can quickly, this is completely local. I don't have to publish this anywhere. I can do this myself using debug, like just kind of nicely build up these things. I can say London and go and get the weather in London. I've no idea if that's the right weather for London because I'm 200 miles away, but it seems about right. That's making an external API call. It's all local. At any point, like I say, I can take this code and I can go and export it and download it. Oh, here it is. As a zip file, and I can go and look at it. I can go and drop into the code and change the code. This is a really nice way of kind of building up bots, both, I think, if you're new to the game, but also actually, even if you're not new to the game and you just want to do something quickly, you want to sit down. This is really, really good for sitting down with business people who are not techies, but understand what they want their bot to do. You can sit through, like you can go through different conditions, you can go through different process flows, like users can see it all on the screen. You can in real time build up the flow of your bot and how that user, like that interface to the bot should look. Really, really nice. So I'm a big fan of Bot Framework Composer. Okay, here are some screenshots in case it all went wrong, but it didn't, so that's all good. The other thing that is worth talking about is Power Virtual Agents. So also Ignite announced at Ignite 2019, so slightly confusingly, because it was announced kind of in the same kind of conference that the Bot Framework Composer was, but this is also a way to build bots. Now it's part of the Power Platform, and it allows you to build kind of bots also by dragging and dropping on a kind of canvas, which again makes it slightly confusing. But the real kind of key strength here is that you can create bots that directly execute Power Automate flows. So if you're an organization that is big on using flows, and I think flows are great, by the way, as like a low-code solution to get stuff done, I think they're really powerful. So if that's you and you've got loads of flows that the business has built and they like and they maintain them, and you want to wrap a bot around that to make it easier to consume, to capture information that you need to kick off the flow and all the rest of it, go have a look at these Power Virtual Agents, because they do make it really easy to do that stuff. They've got built-in support as well for handoff to human and stuff like that as well. They are a bit more of a black box. So if you want to be able to drop into the code, I would go look at Bot Framework Composer. These are a service. It's like I say, it's part of that kind of low code, no code Power Platform. So they are a bit more black box. They are licensed, so there's a cost to using them basically, in the way that there isn't really for the Bot Framework Composer, other than obviously the Azure hosting costs you need to bear in mind. But actually, to use the Bot Framework Composer, there's no cost. And then all of these you can publish to teams in the same way that you can Bot Framework. Interestingly, under the hood, there's a lot of shared code and there's a lot of shared experience under the hood as well. So there are some things you can do that you can sort of take the best of both actually into a really nice kind of solution. So an example of that is you can build skills. So skills are like little nuggets of Bot Framework stuff that solve a particular problem. So you can build a skill in Bot Framework using the Bot Framework Composer or using just regular code that solves a very specific problem. So if you've got a dev team, have them build that using Bot Framework. You can then expose that inside Power Virtual Agents. So your business users can then literally drag that in as a skill and have Power Virtual Agents use it inside other kind of no-code solutions. So you can mix and match them like that. And that makes it kind of really powerful inside an organization to kind of get those business processes done. So two different ways there of writing bots, two slightly different, both with advantages and disadvantages. Just kind of, you got to pick the one that's right for you. Okay, the third pillar that we talked about is Microsoft Graph. Now, I'm kind of going to assume as a baseline you understand already roughly what Microsoft Graph is and what it isn't. So let's kind of hope that's true. What I mean when I say Microsoft Graph APIs for developing on Teams, I kind of mean the lifecycle APIs. So I mean being able to call Graph in order to provision teams, in order to manage teams, dispose teams, post information into teams. So there's a few things that we should talk through because just like things to be aware of, and things like resource-specific consent I'm going to talk through again as well in a minute, and also change notifications, because these all kind of flavor how you deal with Microsoft Graph. So throttling you will come across if you do anything that is more than trivial inside Microsoft Graph. It's just a thing to understand and be aware of. It's not anything to be scared of. It's just Graph protecting itself. What makes it slightly confusing is that there's throttling applied at several different levels. So there's Graph level throttling and there's service level throttling, and depending on which service you're calling, you'll get throttled differently. Each service has different limits. They all respond in slightly different ways. So it can be a little bit confusing, but kind of basically if you get 49 responses, back off, wait. Sometimes you'll get a retry header, sometimes you won't. If you don't, you've just got to make it up yourself. And just use something like the exponential backoff pattern. Microsoft Teams, specifically to the Microsoft Teams calls, they do publish all their rate limits, which is nice. And there's a page you can go to go and see what all of those limits are, so you can make sure you're inside those limits when you kind of architect your code. But you should also build in support in your code for dealing with 429s and doing backoff. Because if you do get throttled, your throttling counts for your limits as well. So you kind of get into a throttle hole that it's very hard to get out of if you haven't coded in some kind of backoff mechanism. The other kind of interesting and important thing to call out is that in their guidance, Microsoft do make some sort of fairly prescriptive rules around polling and the fact that you shouldn't, and that that's really not a good thing to do. There are better ways to solve that problem I'm going to come on to in a minute. If you need to know when stuff changes, don't necessarily think you have to do polling, because there might be better ways of doing it. Don't know if you know this, but I'm going to mention it anyway. Batching is a really useful way of making multiple graph calls in one go. So it can really help reduce load on your service and also on Graph as well. They can be completely non-dependent. Well, they have to be non-dependent, but they can be across lots of different services. So as long as they are non-dependent events, you can mix and match across lots of different services. They can be different verbs as well, so they don't all have to be gets. For instance, they could be some posts and some patches. You're limited to 20 requests a batch. There's an example on the screen about what you might do there. There's a couple of gets and a patch there across different workloads. Annoyingly, the gets, the /teams endpoint isn't supported for batching. But depending on what you're doing across Graph, you might find that batching is a good way to kind of cut down on some of the traffic, and batching helps you in terms of your throttling limits as well. It's worth mentioning that some of the workloads inside Microsoft Graph support what's called bulk data. So this is a different way of getting the data. So if your goal is to just get all of the available data out of Graph about a particular person or a particular event or whatever it is, and you just want to get all of it out, then go have a look at bulk data, because that's what that's designed for. It will deliver the data directly to Azure Data Factory for you without you having to do anything. So it's a good way of getting a large amount of data quickly. It is limited to just some specific data sets, annoyingly not Microsoft Teams data. I'm mentioning it to you though, because a Teams solution, a Teams application often includes other things as well that are not just Teams workloads. So, and then the other thing that's worth mentioning as well, Delta queries. So if your specific call supports Delta queries, then you should go look at them. A bit like the old sync, you get a token when you make a call. You get a token that tells you how far you've got. You can supply that token next time, and you'll just get the difference. So that can really help avoid kind of polling where you've got lots of dedupe as well to deal with. So that's nice. Okay, there is something completely different as well that you can do to avoid polling, and that's change notifications. So this is not you calling gets on Graph to figure out what's changed. This is you subscribing to changes and Graph telling you proactively every time something changes. It's a much nicer development model for me, I think, because as a developer, I don't have to deal with continual polling. I don't have to deal with deduplication. I can just react in a very event-driven way to Graph telling me when stuff changes. And actually, when I do that, that means my solution can be delivered on a serverless technology such as Azure Functions, which means it's really, really cheap to run as well. So that's how that works. It requires an active subscription. So the way it works is you set up a change notification by sending a post request similar to this one, where you say, this is what I want to be told about. So in this case, my resource is team/all messages. You have to give it an expiration date time, and you post it off, and then Graph will send a validation token to your endpoint. Now, I didn't make clear here actually. The notification URL is where Graph calls you back on. So you have to have an API that is capable of receiving the stuff that Graph is going to send you. And that has to be kind of public and ready to go. What happens when you send this post is that Graph will ping that endpoint with a validation token. You need to send that validation token back in a response in a very sort of crafted way. It's all documented. That's like a handshake, because then Graph knows that the notification URL you supplied is legit, it's ready to receive it, and we're good to go. And then after that point, up until the expiration date, Graph will ping that endpoint every time there's a new Teams message that happens. Really nice. You can renew a subscription before it expires as well by sending a patch, for example, at the end there. So you can actually keep those subscriptions going forever, as long as you just keep renewing them. And basically, you're just telling Graph that you're still interested and you still want those that information to keep coming. So there is some breaking news on this. Well, if the end of August still classes as breaking, there is a public preview to make this even easier. So if you think about change notifications, all that stuff I've just described around setting up a subscription is great. And for some people, that's perfect and it's exactly what they need. But for other people, that's just a bit of a pain. And it's something that every developer using change notifications is going to have to go through. So what Microsoft have done, and said, well, actually, we could take that pain away by making change notifications go directly to Azure Event Hubs. So that's without writing any code, you can click some buttons, fill in some forms, have it so that your subscription goes directly into Azure Event Hubs. You don't have to manage the subscription. You don't have to keep it fresh. You don't have to do all that validation stuff I just spoke about. The data will flow straight into Event Hubs for you. So if you've got a solution that is built in Azure in a serverless way, uses Event Hubs, and then from there takes the data, this might be a really nice way of even avoiding having to write any of the subscription code, which is really, really nice. So the link to documentation there. Yeah, that's public preview at the moment, so you shouldn't really use it in production, but it's worth keeping an eye on for when it goes GA, because that might just shortcut a load of kind of writing of development stuff that you thought you might have to do in order to use change notifications. Okay, so I've done the big three that I said we were going to do. I've left a little bit of time at the end to talk through app templates because I think they're really, really interesting. And I think developers should use them as well as non-developers. So app templates for Microsoft Teams. What if I told you there was a list of apps that are fully working, they're actual downloadable solutions that solve real business problems. They've been built by Microsoft and the community. They've been kind of fully tested. They've been architecture scaled. They've been well documented. They're all open source. They're free. They can be deployed directly into your Azure tenant, and they're adding new apps all the time. That is what app templates for Microsoft Teams is, and I think it's quite exciting. So there's a number of different ways you could approach this. If you don't care that much about the development side of things, if you're just here to kind of see what's possible and you don't really kind of want to get into doing development today, fine, go browse that list. it might be that actually the thing you're looking to achieve is on this list anyway, because these are some common business problems being solved here. HR support, FAQs, a communicator, icebreaker, expert finder, book a room, all these kind of common scenarios. You might just be able to go take that code, deploy it in your Azure tenant, follow the deployment and setup instructions. Boom, you've got an application running that solved the problem you were looking to solve. If you want to make some changes to it, maybe you want to brand it up a bit or just change the flow slightly, you can do that too, because it's all open source and it's all the codes in GitHub. So you can take it, download it, change it around a bit, off you go again. So that's one way of doing it. The other way to look at it is if I am a developer and I want to build something like this, but I'm not really sure the best way to do it, all this code's in GitHub, so you can download it and you can just look through it for ideas. This is kind of Microsoft best practice code. It's been built in the main by Microsoft engineers. And so you can look through it for, oh, I wonder how they do that. You know, how do they proactively send messages to people? Because that's quite hard to do in Teams today. You can look through it, figure out how it's done. The icebreaker bot, I think, is a good way of doing proactive notifications for that. So yeah, there's really kind of nice resource of stuff available there. Let's just look at one in detail for a second. So list search is just one I've chosen kind of at random. What it does is surface information in SharePoint list. So it recognizes that people have lots and lots of good information tied up in SharePoint in lists, and wouldn't it be great to just quickly surface that as a messaging extension, very similar to the one I showed you earlier for the product catalog, but just tied to a SharePoint list instead, rather than a CMS or a database or anything. So that's what it does. The application actually comes with a nice admin portal thing where you can choose the list that you want to expose, and gives you the application that you can drop straight in as a messaging extension for your users that kind of ties directly to that SharePoint list and exposes that information. So if that sounds like something that is of interest, you go there, you follow the link, and you'll see what looks like GitHub. So if you're a developer, you'll be really familiar with this. Great, I can download the code, I can see how it works. If you're not a developer, this might be a bit off-putting. Stick with it, because if you look down towards the bottom, you've got a nice kind of introduction. It tells you everything, how it works. It's also got some links off to documentation, deployment guide, and architecture. And that's something that all of the app templates have. They all have documentation, deployment guide, and architecture. So the documentation kind of takes you through in a really nice way everything it works, like how it's supposed to work, how you set it up, you know, all the steps. The deployment guide is step by step, doesn't assume anything. If you can follow instructions, you can deploy it as well. So again, really nice if you're coming into this for the first time. And then if you need to get this through like central IT, if you need to get through governance, or if you just want to understand a bit more about how it works, they all come with an architecture guide as well that shows you exactly what bits are being deployed where, how it all ties together, and what each piece is for. So a really kind of nice wrapped kind of set of solutions that are either something you can take away today, or something that you can take, build on, and evolve, or just use as kind of like an exercise in understanding how stuff works. Okay, so hopefully I've tried to leave some time for questions. I've no idea if there are any. This would be a good time to think about your questions. I should have given you more warning. But hopefully I've kind of convinced you that you should be building apps and teams. Not only should you be doing it, but that it's actually quite exciting to do it, and also that it's not very hard to do it. There's lots of entry points, there's lots of stepping off places to kind of go to get started, whether that's in the UI, whether it's the Microsoft Learn modules, whether it's just the toolkits, so you can get that scaffolding up and running quickly and get to all the like the back-end gubbins and stuff, and actually just start putting your solution on top. Or whether it's bots with the Bot Framework Composer or Power Virtual Agents. Also, hopefully I've tried to get across that this is actually quite important, that we as developers, as IT folk, do this for our users right now. Users are spending more time in teams. They are collaborating more right now, more than ever. They're spending hours at a time inside Microsoft Teams, in meetings, on calls. It's how we communicate and collaborate right now. So bringing that information in to Teams to expose to users is vitally important right now. It helps users be more productive. It helps empower them as well. So I think that's what you need to be doing right now for my money. So if you haven't already built apps for your organization, for your team, you really should. Why haven't you? There's lots. I put lots of links on this screen, and there's links kind of sprinkled throughout the slides as well. There's loads and loads of tools out there to help you. Go build something. Go and build something this week. Try and build something today. If you want to just build something I haven't even shown you about, go to qandamaker.ai. If you want to do something in 10 minutes, if you've got a list of questions and answers and you just want to build a bot out of that uses natural language processing, then just go and do that, because that's really simple to do today. Go and download the toolkit, do some scaffolding to understand how to build a tab or how to build a messaging extension. Go and do that this week. I think you'd be really surprised at how far you can get and what happens. Thanks very much for your time. My name is Tom Morgan. I always leave that to the end because I don't think anyone cares at the beginning who I am. So my name is Tom Morgan. I work at Modality Systems. As you can tell, I'm kind of pretty passionate about the Teams platform space. And so you can always kind of ask me questions if you find me on social media and stuff. We've got some time for questions. I think we've got like 10 minutes. So if you've got questions, throw them into the question machine and we can go through them. If not, I can carry on talking, or we can just sit here awkwardly. We'll find out. I'm also interested, actually, if you don't have questions, but you do have things to say, I'm interested, are people doing these things today? Are you building on the Microsoft Teams platform today? And if you are, what are you building? Okay, there are some questions, that's good. So, is there an option for Teams Toolkit to generate TypeScript project instead of JavaScript? I don't think so, but I can't remember. So what I kind of alluded to sort of in passing, there's actually kind of two scaffolding systems out there at the moment. There's the Yeoman generator, which is a bit more it's community driven and it's been around longer. And then there's the toolkit, which is sort of built into Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code, which is Microsoft provided, but hasn't been around quite as long. I'm pretty sure that the Microsoft one just does React, like JavaScript, doesn't do TypeScript. I don't know about the Yeoman one. I would go check it out. I'm not sure is the honest answer, but I would kind of look there. However, it's worth, so the toolkit, and you've probably heard this before from other sort of Microsoft people, but there'll be a user voice for that toolkit. So go add that to user voice, or go and find it on user voice and upvote it, because that team are like responsive to that stuff. They want to improve it as well. It's a relatively kind of new thing. It's like a V1 for them, so they're looking to build it and add new features as well. So go check that out. There's some things. Do you know if the Azure bot for Slack allows the Slack channel Teams chat integration? Two-way comms, yes, it does. So you can build a bot in Bot Framework and add it to a Slack channel, and then have a two-way communication with a bot. Now, you can separately have that same bot be available on Teams chat. So I think, if I'm understanding the question, can you write a bot that allows users in Slack to talk to users in Teams? I'm hoping that's what you're asking. If it is, so no, not natively, but here's how you could do it. You could build that interface in the middle. So the bot framework speaks both languages. So it speaks Slack and it speaks Teams. So you could have an application that is accessible on both platforms and receives Slack messages and sends Teams messages and vice versa. There are some rules about proactive messaging. So in the main, it's quite hard to do. So the bots in Bot Framework are designed to respond to users. They're not really designed to be proactive sending out of stuff, because imagine if you could write bots that just could proactively spam users all the time. It would be a wasteland of crazy spam and phishing attempts, wouldn't it? So in the main, they tend to be responsive. There are some workarounds for Teams, so you can do it for Teams. I don't think you can do it for Slack, but you could definitely take stuff in for Slack and then post out stuff on Teams. Or if you've got users talking both to the bot, you can kind of do that. Just take a message from here and send it over there. Is there a way to integrate Teams and get access to the video audio streams for one? Enhancing quality. Oh, sorry, for one, enhancing quality using AI, audio for doing transcription and compiling notes. Yes, I didn't really cover it because it's kind of diving off the end of complication. There's something called the calling API, and it comes in two forms. I think you're going to want the second, more complicated form, but let me just take you through it. The first one is it's Graph API endpoint. So if you go and look in the Graph API reference and flip over to the beta, not the V1 one, the beta, and go look down at, I think probably either online meetings or communication, online communication, I think it's called. Anyway, you can make calls there. You can create a bot that can be dropped into meetings. You can call, and you can call on audio. You get Graph API calls when that happens sent to you. You can respond. You can send audio clips as well. You can do DTMF tones. You can do quite a few things. You can transfer users around as well. What you were talking about though is getting access to the actual audio video stream. You can do it. It's a different thing. It's not done through Graph. It's called local media. It's a .NET application style. You can download the sample code to kind of get started. There's quite a few hoops to jump through. It's more designed for building kind of contact solutions or compliance recording solutions. You can absolutely do it though, and you'll get raw access to both the video and audio streams. So there's a sample code. If you go looking off the one that's on the screen, actually, developer.microsoft.com/Microsoft Teams. If you go looking there is a sample somewhere for takes the video stream and puts like a green hue on it and sends it back again. So you can do like video manipulation, and you could conceptually do audio manipulation as well using some of the other Azure API endpoints for doing cognitive services workloads, such as you can take snippets of audio and send them off for transcription and compilation as well. Are there additional license costs if you want to use bots in Teams? No, other than if you're using Power Virtual Agents, there's a license cost for using that. But if you're just building bots in Bot Framework and deploying those, there is no extra license cost for doing that. Can I explain throttling again? Yes, so throttling happens when you call the Graph API too quickly, basically, and the Graph API is protecting itself. And so it's got built-in limits for this person can't ask me more than 10 things a second or something. And if they do, I'm just going to stop dealing with them for a minute. I'm just going to like banned, you can't do anything for a minute. Sorry, come back in a minute's time. It's a bit more nuanced than that, but that's sort of roughly how the throttling works. You'll know because you'll be making calls and getting 200 OK responses and all will be great, and then suddenly you'll make exactly the same call, you haven't changed anything, but suddenly you're getting back a 429 message, your status code, HTTP status code of 429, which just means sorry, denied, throttled, try again later. If you're lucky, in the body that comes back, it will tell you how long you've been kind of banned for, and whether or not, what your retry time is. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. It depends on the workload. That's it really. So as a developer writing code, you should be aware of that because you'll need to handle it, do something with it, stop everything else in your application talking to Graph on that particular work. And it's a bit more, you can either if you've got an application that goes across lots of different endpoints in Graph and lots of different services, so you've got like Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, whatever, you might not have to back off across the board. Depends kind of where you're being throttled, and it's not always obvious, so it's a bit nuanced, but in general, just back off, wait. Exponential back off is what you should do if you don't know what else to do, which is basically back off, wait 10 seconds, try again. If you still get throttled, wait 20 seconds, back off, try again, then 40 seconds, 80 seconds, 120 seconds, and go like that. And then that kind of reduces how many times. What you shouldn't really do is just madly keep retrying 49, 49, 49, because those 49, every one of those actually counts as your throttling limit as well. So you're just making the situation worse. Do you know if there'll be a bot to voice interface? I don't. I think it would be really good if there was. There are some going the other way. So actually, having said that, so there is a bot to voice interface. So you can build. I've done a blog post on this somewhere. I'll try and dig it out and put it on Twitter in a bit. So you can create a bot that you can send it code, and there is an Azure Cognitive Services endpoint you can send code text to. It will turn it into audio and give you back an audio file. You can send that to the bot and the bot will read it out for you. So yes, you can do it. I've got a blog post about doing it. I'm going to run out of time. If I run out of time, I'll reply on text for all these questions, because I think we are at time. Emma, I don't know if you want to stop me. I can either keep going with questions, or I can do questions in text later. It's entirely up to you.
I'm happy for you to keep going, Tom, and just answer the last few questions. That's fine.
Perfect. Thank you. Where are we? Are those cards sent by messaging extensions, bots, adaptive cards? Yes, they absolutely can be. They don't have to be. You can just send text, but you can absolutely also send adaptive cards. There's a really good site at, I want to say adaptivecards.io. I think that's right. I feel bad for sending people to random websites, but I think that's right. Maintained by the Adaptive Cards team. That's a really nice visual editor for building adaptive cards. If you don't know what they are, adaptive cards allow you to send more than just text. So you can embed images, the layout, the headings. You can make a really nice looking card to send to users. And pretty much everywhere in the bot framework where you can send text, you can now also send adaptive cards. So that's really cool. Can you post a link to weekly update video, LinkedIn site? Yes, I'll do it in. I'll just type it in because it's easier. There we are. Okay. Multilingual support in the bot available and possible. Sort of. In that you could do it yourself, which is not a great answer. The bot framework will tell you the text that your users give you. And it will also tell you the culture of the user, their machine, and certainly anyway, and the language of the machine that it's set in. It's kind of up to you what you do with that. So if you want to translate that into a different language, there's Azure Cognitive Services APIs you can call in real time to do that. There's nothing built in that will do it for you, but it's quite easy to do yourself because you're in complete control of the message that comes in and the message that you send out. So you can absolutely build that in, and the Cognitive Services APIs are there to kind of help you out. And finally, I'll just put my contact details in the chat for you as well around Twitter. I can remember my Twitter one. I can't remember my LinkedIn one, but I'll do that. Perfect. I think that's all the questions. Thanks for all the questions. That's awesome. Yeah, hope it's been useful. Like I say, feel free to ask me follow-up questions on social media, ping me wherever. Yeah, thanks very much for your time.
Thanks so much, Tom, for delivering today's session. It's been great to have you. And thank you to everyone for attending as well, for your great questions, and hope to see you all again at the next Reactor session. Have a good day.